Okay. And hello, everybody, and welcome to Astrospeak. My name is Anthony Picco, and this is a chat show formatted to feature astrologers arguing, cooperating, agreeing, and disagreeing, inspiring each other, and sharing their knowledge. We will be asking questions and asking for feedback and opinions. But of course, everybody here, please keep it as focused and pithy and succinct. We wish to have a lively and active show, and all of these questions involve things I'm pretty sure all of us have experienced. So just remember, play nice and no pontificating. Okay. One of my favorite statements. I am Anthony S. Picco. I'm an astrologer from New York City, and my co-host is from the UK, Michaela Villiers-Kendall, but aren't you living in Belgium now, Michaela?
France. I'm in Southwest France, Aquitaine. Yeah.
Okay. And the rest of us here, I'll have to ask you to introduce yourself as we go through whatever questions and whatnot is happening. The first thing we're really going to start with today is actually not about astrology per se. Very recently, this week, as a matter of fact, we lost what I consider one of the giants of astrology, a gentleman named Mitchell Scott Lewis. He's a New York astrologer. He's been doing it 30, 40 years. He passed away after a battle with cancer this week. He was an extraordinary astrologer. He was very good with financial. He worked down on Wall Street for a while until he said the people on Wall Street were too crazy for him. And then, oops, there we go. Of course, I left something on. He was also a remarkable medical, mundane, and personal astrologer. He'd been on Coast to Coast frequently as a guest discussing astrology and finances. And he had an amazing technique for medical astrology that we were trying to put into some sort of written form, because he didn't do the standard stuff. He would just follow the illness through the chart, as opposed to, knees are Capricorn and Saturn and, a lot of those pieces. He kind of ignored that and had some interesting, fascinating things with it. He was amazing. He's also written 3 books of an astrologer detective, and they're kind of fun. I think one of them is called Death in the 12th House and stuff like that. They're they're lighthearted, but they're serious at the same time. He's got 3 of them. If you want to check out his website, mitchastro.com, or pick up one of his books or whatever. He has webinars and seminars all over the place, and he used to appear in my show, Cosmic Tuesdays, regularly to talk about the upcoming astrology events. So I just want to wish him well. He's a friend of mine, and he is actually, in my opinion, one of the top 25 astrologers in the world, or he was anyway. So I just wanted to mention that, and worth checking out. We lost a great man, and a decent guy too, just in general, not just an astrologer. Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to start with Venus retrograde, because everybody's talking about it right now. And Venus is retrograde right now for a few more weeks. And the only thing I want to say right off the bat, the very basic stuff about Venus retrograde is watch out for old boyfriends or girlfriends coming into your life, because they may turn up again, retro from the past. You may find yourself reassessing a relationship and deciding if you want to be in it or not, depending upon where it falls in your chart. And one of my other favorite little quirks about Venus retrograde, and I've seen it happen, it's a great time to shop in antiquing and secondhand stores, because you will find value, Venus, in an unexpected retro way. So a good time for secondhand stores and antiquing, if that is your kind of thing. But there's a lot more to say about Venus retrograde, and maybe retrograde in general. If anybody wants to pick it up and take it, talk a little bit about Venus and the star points and whatever's going on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Anthony, would you make investments when it's retrograde? I've always wondered about that. I suppose it depends on the aspects it's making.
It would just depend on what else is going on. It depends if I was reinvesting, if it was a rollover, I might do it with Venus. I don't know if I would start a fresh new investment when Venus is retrograde. But
I would think it also matters if your natal Venus personally is retrograde. That would throw a whole different attitude toward doing anything under a Venus retrograde.
That's a good point.
Can I add to that your personal natal Venus is of consideration? Like right now, my Venus in Aries is being trined again and again by this Venus in Leo.
Yeah.
So this is a good.
Yeah, that makes a difference.
Yeah, that considerably, this is a good retrograde for me. I remember horrible Venus retrogrades.
I would love to add that, and I'm team Venus and Aries too, so I can relate to that. But I would love to say that the Venus retrograde phase is just one phase of her 19-month cycle. And I think we should never forget that as much as Mercury retrograde is just one phase of a 4-month cycle, so Venus retrograde, we are closing at the moment the last Venus in Capricorn cycle, which started in January 2022, sorry, and now on August 13th, we are starting a new 19-month cycle in Leo. And I think that is so important to notice, that it's really, the retrograde is like a reset. So we are letting go all of our learnings from the Capricorn cycle, and now we can build upon the learnings from the Capricorn cycle with the Venus in Leo cycle, which lasts again 19 months. And Venus will, after the Cazimi with the Sun, the interior conjunction, will appear as a morning star, and then go in the underworld, and then has her evening star phase, and then the cycle is complete. So it's not just the retrograde. I think the retrograde is really like a reset, a letting go, a release, and a receive the new seeds of the new cycle around August 13th, which we will play and work with all of these Leo topics for the next 19 months. So this Venus and Leo topics are really important for us on a personal but also collective level, not only as long as she is in Leo, but really we will work with these themes, and Leo play with these themes for the next more than 1.5 years. So
yeah, what
I
do you
think
think?
it's really important to see this. It's not just
it's a whole, exactly, it's a whole cycle. What do you think of the square to Uranus in Taurus with this? It's tricky, you think, or
with Uranus? Nah, it's a blessing. No, I'm joking.
The financial markets are a bit dicky, aren't they? Really, again,
and they're going to continue to be, I believe. You know, I think interest rates and inflations and unstable markets is what we're going to see for the next few years, unless a miracle is going to happen, especially with what's happening between the West and Russia,
exactly.
the Eastern axis. You know?
But I think on an individual level, I think it is quite interesting, because I think Venus in Leo is so much about really exploring more our true authentic self, and how we will really show up in the world as our true self. And Venus will trine the North Node when the cycle starts. So the North Node in Aries. And I think the square to Uranus really reflects that there's something around being authentic, and even having the capacity to be ourselves, and to show up in a very authentic way in relationships too, and to express ourselves in a very authentic way. So I think that there is a tension with Uranus and Taurus around all of these Leo topics and Uranus topics of really coming back to our true natural soul self.
Yeah. And it's dealing with the instability, isn't it, of Uranus in Taurus? It's creative dealing with it. So we've got to learn more creative ways of doing it. So, which is happening.
I'd also like to mention, just in general, I think that we've been struggling with Uranus and Taurus, which of course they don't get along very well. But Taurus is about, when connected with Venus, is about the way we value things, the worth we give things. We always bring Taurus back to like, money and cash and stuff, but take it back and it's about what do we have value in something. And I think Uranus in Taurus over the last few years has really shown our values exploding and changing. What we think is important, what we don't think is value of worth it to us. Look at how much the politics have just completely changed. Look how capitalism is running rampant and they're taking all the benefits away. So I think once Uranus gets out of Taurus, the economy will start to adjust itself and not be quite as crazy, but we'll see what happens.
I don't know.
Amen to that. I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Michaela.
I was only going to say last time, when Uranus went into Gemini, it wasn't so great. There was World War II, but hey.
That's what we're all afraid of. we are all standing at the gates of something that seems like great shift, and we know that we can pass it by trial by fire. And we are all hoping that humanity has learned its lessons and is wise enough by now to exempt itself from the horror of going through this again, another war to end all wars. Being
And I
realistic,
also, yeah.
I think parts of humanity have gone in that direction. The problem is we still have a lot of parts that haven't, that are still in the old world.
But I think that Uranus and Taurus is also so much about really valuing the earth again, and all of these movements.
Reevaluating the earth, yeah.
Yeah,
like evaluating the earth again, exactly.
Yeah,
like remembering.
Coming back to the yin energies, coming back to to Mother Nature and natural cycles, and
realizing the importance of it.
So much.
This is the thing I want to bring up too about. I know Uranus and Gemini went into World War II last time, but this time around Pluto's going to be in Aquarius, trining Uranus in Gemini when it finally gets there and catches up, which is, I think, a completely different energy than World War II.
Right.
Could be a reevaluation of everything.
One at a time, guys. One at a time. One at a time. Okay. Go ahead. Somebody say.
Yeah, the only thing was that it was sextile. It was in Leo last time. So Pluto was sextile. So, I mean, obviously Uranus was sextile Pluto. But yeah, so they were in incompatible elements. But I mean, in fire, yeah, I guess it's worse. But hey, I mean,
it's a blessing.
So I would like to add something, kind of pulling from everything that everybody's saying about exploding, about fire, about Mother Earth, and about the Uranus square to Venus. So maybe we can wrap up the Venus star.
Right.
Is that I'm noticing? What came to my mind was that the fire on Maui.
Yes.
And the fires that we've had. And we went through this in California 4 or 5 years ago. And in fact, I think it was the last time that there was a Venus retrograde in Leo. We had fires, big fires in California. But it seems like it comes back to, what we value and how we're taking care of the earth.
Yeah.
Could I add one thing to the Venus and Leo conversation?
Absolutely.
One of the things I thought was really interesting about this is, of course, Venus and Leo can be like the center of their universe, and we're all the center of our own universe in a way. But I noticed that, so on the last full moon, the nodes of Neptune were activated. The sun was pretty close to the north node of Neptune in Leo, and Venus stations on the north node of Neptune in Leo. And so this, coupled with the fact that we've had Mercury and Mars in Virgo this whole time, I've kind of been noticing that there's this theme where the egocentric aspect of Venus and Leo is kind of being pushed into more of this reevaluation of our relationship to our purpose in life in terms of like, what is our service to the collective? And I kind of saw that combination of the north node of Neptune and Leo with the Virgo emphasis adding a different flavor to what Venus and Leo alone might be. So just wanted to add that piece.
I can confirm that, being Venus and Leo conjunct Pluto, I have been definitely thinking about, am I going to be rich? No, I'm rich in so many other ways. Money is not, what I need to be rich in. And, thinking about what my purpose in service is I'm so glad that you brought that up, Bradley, because I was hoping you would say something about the station on the north node of Neptune.
Yeah, it's the spiritual side that has to be brought into it, because it's sorely lacking at the moment, isn't it? Really, I mean, obviously not in the astrological community, but at large, you know, everyone's thinking very materially in every way, even the people who are, you know, campaigning against climate change and everything. Everyone's got their focus on the material, but not much on the spiritual.
There's also a collective focus in politics on the authenticity of organizations and political figures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel that so strongly with the triangle between Venus.
Yes. Yeah, that is the other side of Neptune. Go ahead, sorry.
No, I just wanted to say this authenticity topic is so much, I think the Venus plus the Aries North Node. So there's really this drive, but I also could observe with Venus in Leo, and that totally, is in alignment with what you said, Bradley, that so many people in my surrounding are thinking about collaborations, coming together, so really co-creating. So this idea of Leo co-creation is really strong, and I think that there are so many possibilities and opportunities to not only bring our own light to shine, but also shine together with others to co-create something that is bigger than us. Yeah.
I want to say that belongs to Uranus as well. That's part of the Uranian influence as well.
Yeah.
And Uranus is a great awakener. It brings us back to the recognition of what we promised ourselves to be in spite of what the world makes us, you know, and it awakens us into where we should be, what we should be doing, and who we should be doing it with.
Yeah.
So definitely.
Yeah. You do wonder though, with the, because with the Neptune in Pisces, and also of course the nodes, the south node is quincunx. It's this disinformation thing, delusion. We've got the spirituality, which is the challenge, but then we've got all this misinformation, all this delusional thinking. It's so hard to get through this whole sea of information that is, what can you rely on? You've got to check everything. It's like, I mean, I guess it's Pluto in air coming into that as well, and Uranus in Taurus. It's like, get your facts right. But how do you do that? Because it's so difficult.
Well, and I think it's also about trusting your intuition, trusting your higher guidance.
That's what I was just going to say.
And Pisces calling.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Your spiritual authority. Yeah.
Yeah. Tap into the higher planes.
But some people have trouble deciphering that from delusion. So.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is the problem. When you think you're tapping into the higher planes with spirituality, you might be tapping into more delusion. So this is the problem.
Well, I mean, that's since you know, Neptune has been in Pisces. We've had MAGAs, people believing vaccines don't work, people having all these wonderful fantasies, and yet I've also seen an incredible increase in people like us and spiritual people, or people pursuing new spiritual concepts. I'm going to be much more fascinated to see what two-fisted empathy is like when Mercury goes into Aries. You know, it's like how are you aggressively and directly spiritual and empathetic is a little tricky. It's going to be
when
interesting
Neptune
to watch.
goes into Aries.
Yeah, because you know, right now it's in Pisces, it's in its own home, which is great for the spiritual believers and great for all the delusional people too. I mean,
it's war is one option.
Yeah. So
I don't want to talk about the nodes yet, but you know, it's always a time of polarization. So let's bring it up when the nodes come in.
Right.
But asserting one's own identity in opposition to others, you know, is always the case. And I think we can see in the world there's so much strife and so much civil uprising and so much polarization between basically two groups of people that we can find in any country and in any religion, and most of the times in any family too. One kind understands that we were born butt-naked babies on a round world, and it's a live and let live world, and nobody has a dominion over the truth. And the other group believes that their truth is the only truth, and that all of us need to abide by that truth. I think that's the main struggle in this world right now.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and maybe it's always been the struggle of the world, people's beliefs and
Sure.
perceptions, not the physical reality.
Yeah.
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 You
Yeah,
know,
I was just the other day watching that brilliant film, No Country for Old Men, which I saw
Mhm.
years ago. But watching it again, it suddenly, I suddenly got it. You know how you do that when you watch it again. But that was just about that. It was like, just a minute, was there any country for old men? Because no, there probably wasn't. It wasn't that times had changed. They just had always been the same. And yeah, the hero, the sheriff, realized that in the end. Great film if anyone hasn't watched that, by the way.
I read the book. The book read like it was written like a screenplay. I think they
Yeah,
just
I think it was.
put the
I
book
think
right
it
up
was.
there. So,
Yeah, I did too. Yeah.
but
But I think
So
that
are
talking
we
about that-
done with the Venus star?
I guess we can. I mean, we can certainly talk about retros in general. But I'm. Anybody else have anything additional to say about Venus before we kiss it goodbye for this Astrospeak?
So the only other thing I can say is that I put down here the previous two Venus retrogrades, 8 years and 16 years ago, so you can kind of go back and look at, what the themes were during that period of time down here.
Mhm. Okay, that's great.
I have one question. What are the exterior points? Like I can see there's 4 Libra and then 3 Libra. Are these asteroids? Yeah, I can see those are asteroids. There's a lot of hits and eclipses.
Oh, okay. These ones out
Are
here.
they-
This is Lilith. This is asteroid Lilith, but this
Yeah.
is the south node of Venus.
Okay.
Oh,
Because there's a lot of eclipses coming up also in 2024 on those degrees.
Yes. Yeah, quite right. Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting.
so South Node of Venus is at 3 degrees of Libra.
that for the Venus star, it moves.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody has anything else to continue about Venus? I'm not against it. This is not a topic I'm most conversant in. So if anybody else has to add anything,
Does
we can
anyone
move on.
know where the next one is? Where the next in the cycle is? 19 months now? Or
It's in
probably not?
Aries.
Oh, it is in Aries.
Yeah,
Okay.
in March 2025.
Right. Would Neptune have moved in by that time? I forget. No.
I think not yet, but I'm not 100% sure. I just
That's-
know that the next star point is in Aries. The next
Right.
cycle is in Aries.
So, 'cause
Yeah.
they're always in the same element. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like Neptune gets into Aries in 2026, roughly. I mean,
So not far off.
Yeah, the middle of
No.
2025.
Why
yeah,
is that?
then it backs out and goes
Right.
back the usual dance. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So
and at that
yeah,
point, and by
What about
2020,
Pluto?
in 2020, well, Pluto will be getting back into Capricorn back in Aquarius next year. I think it dips in one more quick time.
Yeah.
But about 2025 is when Uranus goes into Gemini. So we're actually getting 3 planets switching one boom, boom, boom after another,
Yeah.
which is usually a big shift in energy. We're going from that Taurus to Gemini, Pisces to Aries, and then
Fire and
yeah,
Saturn and Neptune will have their conjunction in Aries.
right.
Well, ain't that a blessing?
That's
Right,
sorry.
and we will at the same time as the Venus star in Aries will kind of kick it off.
Yeah, the Venus, I mean, it will be a Venus and Aries cycle when the whole things in Aries are happening. So
Yeah,
yeah,
when
Be a war of ideas.
Yeah, as
Yeah.
they shift.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could almost see Neptune in Aries be more warmongering because there's going to be delusions and aggression, based on your fantasies or belief systems or whatever they might be. So,
Yes.
but we may not have a world war. Maybe the money will correct itself. Who knows? Good.
we will
Amen to
maybe
that.
find
Amen
more
to that.
more spirituality within ourselves as individuals. So
It's going to be information wars.
Yes,
Mm.
definitely.
It's all
Yeah.
going to be in the, information.
But
So
So
they'll
dangerous
probably
anyway, isn't it?
be a lot of problems with deceptive information, like we're already seeing, but it'll probably get worse.
I think that some of the answers that we're going to have to that, as much as I don't like them, are going to have sort of a hive mind. Think of when Uranus comes into Gemini, collective thinking with all those chips that Elon Musk is FDAing, approving right now, for actually connecting us to one another on a level that is unprecedented, thinking together. We will come to that point. Is that a blessing?
Well, at the moment, that wouldn't work very well, but thinking together, I don't know. Depends what we think.
But I also think when Gemini is so much about diversity and being open and curious, and when Uranus comes there, so there is also the opportunity that we are in our groups together, coming together with more openness, with more curiosity, with more maybe acceptance about diverse opinions and so on. So there's also this more positive opportunity.
Thank you for this reminder.
As long as Gemini doesn't go around scattering all its energies and starting 5,000 projects when you can't get 2 done. That's the other side of Gemini.
In World War II, of course, computers, that's when they were developed, and there was the Enigmas, thing.
The Enigma code, yeah.
So much actually advancement in communications and technology.
Or hidden communications and technology, because that was all code work. So that's certainly Uranus and Gemini, confusing Gemini energy. Is this a real sentence? No, it's in code. Okay, thank you. So as long as we're on this topic and we're talking about what's coming up, Pluto is finally rolling into Aquarius full time for the next 20 years. And of course, we can all argue about when the age of Aquarius started. I personally aesthetically believe the age of Aquarius started when we started mass producing items, because for the first time we had 2 things that were exactly the same. Before we started production and manufacturing, everything was handmade. So I'm saying the beginning of the industrial age could very well be the beginning of the age of Aquarius. I'm not speaking in terms of planets and shifts of the sun, but the consciousness. I mean,
I see it as the beginning of the transition.
Yes, absolutely.
The foreshadowing.
I mean, the idea that like once upon a time everything was unique, I've got CDs that 1 million other people probably have copies of, and that didn't happen back then. So that's a big shift in consciousness. The last couple 100 years, our entire planet has shifted more conceptually speaking than it has in the previous 3,000, 4,000 in terms of electronics. And now we go into the Aquarian age, formally with Pluto moving in there too. So I'm just wondering what your take on is. That I know Aquarius can be humanitarian, and I've also heard other people telling me that Pluto can make it corporations taking over the world. So anybody has any thoughts of what the next 20 years?
I don't think Pluto in Aquarius is going to put corporations taking over the world. I think almost the opposite might be true. I hope that's true. But because, just the idea that we have the internet and such connectivity to the entire world, no matter where we are, is an extremely Aquarian attitude, I think. And, a lot of this came home to me during the pandemic of how we weren't really isolated while we were isolated. And I think that's going to be a part. I feel that's kind of Aquarian in and of itself, because Aquarius is not a warm, snuggly feeling sign, but it does need to connect to other people. And it does have the concept of the whole as part of its energy. So what we have is a removal of the individual from having to be in the group physically through the internet. And I think this came home during the pandemic, but yet that isolated individual is still connected to the big picture, to the whole, to the cosmic group. And I think that's a really big deal of Pluto going into Aquarius, that this is going to even be more expanded.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Because I always try to remember that Aquarius is the other side of Leo, and so the individual, instead of serving themselves, turns around and goes to serve society.
Right.
in their unique way. So you still have that Leo energy going, it's, I invented this, kind of a thing, and I'm going to improve. And I've even heard stories of high school students inventing robots to sweep the ocean and gather, they didn't go into some big think tank and take care of it. Somebody said, hey, I'm going to do something about it. And that to me can be very Aquarian energy in general. So I could see the beginning of the breakdown of the pyramid structure, because I think Aquarian energy is more tribal.
Yeah.
As you're saying, like we've got all these Facebook groups and this website, and we're all kind of coming together that way, as opposed to the pyramid structure. Not that it's going to go away overnight. It'll be kicking and screaming every step of the way, but I think that might be part of what we're seeing happening. People taking their own
responsibility. It's not going to be a quick process overnight, no. But we have a very long time in which to immerse ourselves in the concepts of that and to make that manifest. And we're just at the beginning. But I think it's really happening. I mean, I tend to look for these things as I go through my daily life, and I'm seeing it everywhere, that there is a connectivity that I don't think was there before, and an attitude of, understanding, not necessarily completely or very well, but having a beginning of an understanding with people and cultures that are remote and not of ours. And yet there's becoming an understanding and tolerance of the differences and an appreciation for that. Not everywhere, surely, but there are lots of places that you can see that happening.
Yeah, I feel too that it's so much about the hierarchical structures are resolving. And I want to say that not only on a collective level, but in our psyche too.
Yes.
So I feel that it's very much about really letting go of this idea that there is an oppressor and we repress something, and really developing and evolving more acceptance for authenticity and creating structures that are more like a tribe, as you said.
And don't you find too that when there is some kind of an oppression, and I don't mean just on the world stage, or someone taking advantage or something like that, even on a personal, like you're walking down the street and you're witnessing something, other people are tending to step in for strangers and help, even though there's no benefit to them. I see that all the time where I am. And, this goes in, it flies in the face of many of my friends who say, oh no, everything's really evil. I live in Chicago. And when I take the bus, for example, every single time I do, I witness strangers helping strangers for no particular reason other than to be nice, to be helpful. And I see that as a very positive shift. And I do equate that to an Aquarian attitude.
Yeah,
On the one
Thank
hand,
you for that.
Hey, I'm real positive about this. I know we're going to, but I'm really positive about the outcome.
Yeah, which shows what a positive perspective can do, which there is that.
But you have to look for it.
Pollyanna, obviously. Yeah.
I've been accused of that. But
right.
you have to look for it, because if you're not looking to see it, you're going to miss it. And you're going to see the negative stuff. And that's a problem I have a couple friends who are very negative in life and, in general. And I keep telling them, you have to look for the positive. You never do. And that's part of your problem. Of course, they don't listen.
Look for the light that's casting the shadow.
Yeah.
And astrology is so beautiful because we all, when we know about the archetypes, we can see their potential too, not only their
Ain't that a blessing? Thank Goddess for that.
Yeah. And I think with Aquarius, Pluto and Aquarius, I also see a huge opportunity for trauma healing. So with Uranus and Taurus, all of these somatic healing practices came up. And I think with Pluto and Aquarius, there is a huge opportunity to heal trauma that we have maybe taken over from generations before. And really now, I see it, I'm Pluto and Scorpio, and I see it, I have many clients who are Pluto and Scorpio too. So there is such an intense urge to heal trauma, to heal maybe trauma from generations, from our ancestry. And I think that there I see that it's coming, it's evolving, it's there's a huge opportunity with that too.
I think you're right.
I think part of it also is that we, you know, I'm seeing a lot online, of course, people from my generation, the baby boomers, are putting things like, do the kids know what this is? And they put up like a cassette, you know, and I'm like, but the thing is that I think there's been a remarkable shift between the younger generations because they're entering a world that we don't know and we'll never know because we have different charts. You know, it's like, yes, I know how to dial a phone. That's not going to do me any good. I mean, it's nice to have known it, but it's not going to help us in the future. And I think what's happening, and some positive, some negative, but the newer generations are reassessing what does society mean? How do I stand out? And I think that's why you have so many, the people that are kicking and screaming about not going into the future. I would even say they're like the age of Pisces people that don't want to go into the age of Aquarius. They know what's changing and they're desperate not to let it happen. And I think that's what we're going to have to resolve over the next couple of years of who's got the fantasies and who's got the reality.
When we're really going to see a big difference. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to pick up on what Anthony is saying, and let's think back about, you know, the Pluto in Leo generation, talking about, you know, yes, and talking about also, you know, the Second World War as well. You know, it began at 38, and having this Pluto opposition right now, and the reshifting and rethinking about power and about what is real strength, you know, and how does it play out now? How does it play out in the society that we're in, not in our personal lives anymore, not in our character?
I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens with the children born into Pluto and Aquarius 18 and a half years later, when we've got, you know, the nodal cycle coming back to where it was, because we're going to see 18 or so years later what that generation is going to actually do, because they'll be coming into maturity of a sort, you know, early maturity, but maturity nonetheless. And I think that the whole world is going to be significantly changed because of them. And the young people I see right now, regardless of, you know, where their outer planets are, I am amazed at how spectacular so many of these young people are. And I'm like, yes, please take over. This is your world now. Please do it, because my generation has screwed it up. A lot of, and previous generations and following ones too. So I just see a real positive thing, but you have to look for it.
Yeah, I see it with the Pluto and Sagittarius generation. There's so much positive power and so much enthusiasm to really create something here on planet Earth that is more in alignment. I'm always a little bit amazed by some Pluto and Sagittarius people who are coming in with so much wisdom already. So I sometimes think, wow, they have been in past life, they have been in all cultures.
They're very likely to want to be all inclusive of all kinds of people, which I mean, I don't know how it is in other countries at this point, but I'm seeing in the United States as I look around, and I live in a big city, but what I see is, you know, younger people, they are such a mix of everything that is possible, and their friends, and the group is incredibly eclectic. And I think that's a very positive thing for our future.
And
sorry, I'll stop being so Pollyanna.
No, I'm all for Pollyanna too.
It's great to be Pollyanna, but there is a shadow to think about, though.
Yes.
Which is dangerous if we don't acknowledge it, because we have, you know, this is the balancing act, isn't it? We have to.
How do you see that shadow manifesting? Well,
looking at the Second World War and the First World War, it started to manifest then with communism coming up, you know, then fascism and Nazism and all these isms, and that hasn't gone away is the problem. It's sort of loitering. Yeah, and actually in some places it's growing bigger and more powerful. Yeah. That is the worrying thing that I think we do have to be very, very conscious of, because if we're too focused on everything being great, we might miss the shadow. We might delude ourselves, and we might be taken in fact, by the shadow, because that's what it does to people. I mean, look at Russia. The poor, you know, the Russian people are completely I mean, they're you know, completely harnessed, and maybe some of them are taken in. Quite a lot probably are, but and that's what's happened to them, and you know, in China too, and other places around the world. And it is a threat that's looming. And I think that's also what Pluto and Aquarius is about. It's about be aware of the shadow. It's come back in its opposite from Pluto and Leo, and it was in Cancer when the First World War started. So it had gone into these, it was ingressing then into Cardinal, then fixed. So it's a sort of warning to say, yeah, okay, but we must be conscious of this, because you can see it in Western countries too. There's problems, there's the seeds of problems starting, and if we're not very conscious, they could grow. You know, for instance, in Britain, there's this migration problem, which actually wouldn't have come about. I won't get into that, but it wouldn't have come about if it hadn't been for Brexit in the first place. But no one is admitting that there, and it looks like the migrants are going to get scapegoated, and it's really terrible. Actually, it's a problem. It wouldn't have, and the government is sort of pushing them into getting scapegoated. I'm getting very worried about, you know, my country of birth, because it needs to assert itself. Otherwise, it could go the way of, you know, Nazi Germany. It's, you know, maybe not as bad as that because it's different times, but you know, you get the right mix and you get the times, and you've got a big problem. And you know, it could have happened anywhere, really. Europe, America.
I say it's happening everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. It's happening in Israel, United States, and Russia, and Europe. Everywhere I look, I see these fascist extremists rise up, you know, and really try and rule by fear and aggression over others, you know, and making their own truth rule over the truth of others, you know, disrespecting the truth of others.
That's what scares me the most about Neptune going into Aries, is
Yes.
that attitude that, you know, you're going to believe firmly and go to war for something that isn't actually true.
Yes.
Yeah.
And making others think that your reality is theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Tricking them.
And they'll believe it. Yeah.
Yes.
And the other thing briefly I sort of mentioned, I mean, a friend of mine talked about how Pluto in Aquarius could mean corporate overlords or whatever you want. And what I can see is that if Pluto in Aquarius, they start wanting to do progress, well, you can have this massive organization. There's your Pluto. The question is, where is the progress coming from? What will come in and try to take over from the individuals doing it? So I can see a power struggle. We're seeing, since World War II, you've watched the moneyed people, basically in America, I don't know, but they get all of their taxes back. Back at the end of World War II, we taxed them wealthy at like 90%. We built interstate, we built bridges, we went to the moon, and they've all gotten all their money back thanks to Reagan. And now what I'm finding is that lately in the past 6 months, I'm seeing a lot more people screaming about that because COVID's over, rents are tripling, salaries aren't, people don't have to work. The whole structure's up for change. And the question is, who changes it, the individuals, or will some idiot with a lot of money come in and try to impose their will, which would be the Pluto kind of energy in that sense? I'm not predicting, I'm just trying to look at what's...
I'm with the people.
I'm with the people too. I'll die with the people, but you just don't know.
All are.
We shall see.
I think that being filthy rich in the future would be as immoral as having slaves.
And just to go back into history, I want to point out...
Is that communism, though? I mean, you know?
I'm a social anarchist.
I am too.
Socialism is not communism. Don't confuse them.
No, it's not. That's the problem. It set out as to be socialism, but then it became communism.
Well, and then there's democratic socialism versus socialism.
That's the thing. That's why that has to be maintained. But otherwise, it
has to be democratic socialism.
The Aquarian energy is very much an anarchist energy, because anarchy and social anarchy talk about living in a society that has no central ruler, but autonomies that co-rule under a constitution, a mutual constitution.
Right.
And no central power, because power corrupts. And it's an utopic structure that cannot exist in society today, because we're not up to par with the consciousness needed yet. you know?
And we still don't know what's going to happen with COVID and pandemics, because that's rolling on back in, and not as fast as it was when it first got here. We get enough mutate. We're going to be living with this for the rest of history.
Mhm.
So that's going to make a big shift in our government. And regarding the wealthy, by the way, they're not going to let it go freely. Okay, we're going to have a majority of people, because as J.P. Morgan once said, and this is a quote, the working class, I can hire half the working class to kill the other half.
Ooh.
That's
Oh,
the
yeah.
war. That's the next information war that we'll
That's
face.
yeah, and that's a good. So it's going to be interesting to see what will happen.
Who owns the information, as in, you know, social media and
Right.
news media structures?
Yes.
And a lot of this has to do, and I'm going to just go really way out here. All these problems started. We invented money. You couldn't hoard when there was no money. I mean, you hoard some bananas, they're going to rot. Okay, and actually, Incan society had no money, and everybody worked. Okay, the ones that they, you know, the Spanish went in and killed them all for not being capitalists and pagans. They had no money, and they worked fine with each other. So this whole idea that we can abstract what things are worth into pieces of paper or cryptocurrency or anything else is part of where the problem is. As long as somebody thinks they can hoard, you know, what is the billionaires control like 90% of the world's wealth?
Bartering bananas, though.
Yeah.
Well, it isn't even real anymore. It doesn't actually have
No,
any
but I don't
physical
have any
substance anymore.
Yeah.
Over
Yeah.
90% of the world's wealth is concentrated at the upper 10% of the world
Right.
society. And within that upper 10%, over 90% of the wealth is concentrated in the first 3%.
Yes.
Okay?
And as Anthony said, they're not going to let that go easily. So
No.
we have got this to be aware of, and society does need to be aware of it, because the danger is they are not going to let go of the control. And as you said, Robin, they're going to use information technology to do so. That's
Yeah.
the obvious weapon, isn't it?
I mean,
It's always
that's the scariest part about AI, is being able to figure out what's real, what's genuine, and what isn't. The word real is becoming meaningless at this point.
Yeah,
But what's
exactly.
honest and true as opposed to what isn't.
Another shadow weapon I see manifesting from it is the depersonalization that comes along with technology.
It's
Mhm.
yeah.
It's Leo in. Back to our authenticity.
Yes.
Exactly.
Anyway,
I think
shall-
about the technologic options that, you know, Uranus presents, and the
Yes.
options it presents to be more authentic. You know, it's the dissonance presenting itself at the same time.
and it's a
Working
way.
out the polarities, you know.
It's going to be interesting. I know that much.
But that's why astrology is so great, and it is spreading now, isn't it? It's getting more widespread astrology, as you said, Anthony.
well-
Unfortunately, there is popularist astrology.
That brings us to the next question.
It's a segue.
Before
I'm-
before we move on,
Go ahead.
I've seen Bradley try and
Sorry, I haven't even
and-
gone on here. Where is
and
it?
come into a couple of times, and all of us Geminis are chatting away. Bradley, do you have anything to add before we move on?
I'll just add one thing and say that, well, I love the conversation on the generations. So when we think about this Pluto and Aquarius era, looking at how each generation is going to respond to it. And one of the things I've thought about a lot is this Pluto and Sag generation, which we touched on for a second there. It's interesting because they grew up with the Pluto and Capricorn era. And so they grew up in this reality that was so not natural. And I think that their core soul desire is to kind of just live freely and naturally. And it's just been like more rules, more restrictions, even before the pandemic, but they've lived in such a restricted way. Even like you think of Sagittarius and education, and all the standardization of education and just all the approaches to society that have been so Capricorn. So to me, with that sextile between Pluto and Aquarius to that Pluto-Sag generation, I'm really excited about how that generation is going to kind of explode with Pluto and Aquarius, because I think they're coming from growing up in a society that they're like, this is messed up. There's nothing natural about this. Like we reject this.
You know what, Bradley? That brings up something I hadn't really thought about, but it is so interesting now that I've heard you say it, is that each Pluto generation grows up in the next sign
And rejects it.
and has to say, what is this? I mean, I'm thinking, okay, Pluto in Leo generation grew up in Pluto in Virgo. And what did that generation do? Say, no, we don't want all these restrictions. We don't want all these absolute ways in which everything gets done. So there's probably always some kind of a rebellion from the generation that's growing up in the sign that doesn't fit it.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's something for me to think about. Thanks for prompting that.
yeah, absolutely. That is a good point.
It's definitely, yeah, and it's definitely something. And the thing to keep in mind that it's each sign kind of leads from the one before it. And in 2008, the economy collapsed because Pluto and Leo was stuffing overvalued real estate packages together. So that was a lot of Sag energy going, let's blow it up really big. And then, of course, Capricorn came along and said, you can pop it just like this. And the economy collapsed. But instead of bailing the economy out, we bailed the wealthy out, which is not the economy. And that's where a lot of but
Right.
There's Pluto and Capricorn. Oh, well, you know what? We'll give this to old money and the people that are authorities. They'll fix it. Well, no, they didn't. But, so I'm all for Pluto and Sagittarius, but they ain't saints. Okay. I'm playing with it here. Keep in mind, if anybody knows me, I can be a little flippant, so please don't take anything too personally when I say stuff. But what we're with the shadow and everything we're talking about, which leads us kind of into the next. I'm sorry, Bradley, you're done, right? You're finished what you'd said, and okay,
yeah,
okay. This has been getting to me lately, and I just want to point out I'm a cranky Capricorn, even if I have Uranus opposite my sun. It seems to me, I've started doing astrology professionally in 1986. And it seems to me many things have sprung unbidden from people's heads and now are becoming what I consider astrological fact. The fact that bothers me is I feel in many ways, I'm not against new ideas, but I think astrology is getting muddied and polluted. And one example I have, a very simple one, is I've spoken to a lot of astrologers that have been here for a long time. Nobody seems to have heard of the shadow period of retrograde until the last decade or so. So where did this come from? And there's even Isabel Hickey, when she wrote her book, she waited till 30 years before she ever talked about Pluto. Now I'm hearing that's Eris, therefore it means this, we should use this and this. And suddenly all this information, and I see no studies, I don't see, and I know some of it, I feel, is websites, because anybody can put up a website. It doesn't have to be vetted or proven or anything, which is why I get lots of crazy questions from clients. I went to the website and it said, I'm going to kill my mother. You're not going to kill your mother. Stop it. So what I'm looking at, and things like Lionsgate, to me, Lionsgate, I have not investigated it, but I'm just like, where did this come from? So there's a part of me that wonders what can be done about that, or is it being polluted, or am I just being cranky? Or what? Because I'm sure other people have seen things that they in particular say, oh, well, over here they're doing this and I don't like that. So I open it up. What have you learned about astrology lately that you said to yourself, where the hell did that come from? Go ahead, Nia.
Thank you. We have a lot of that. That's part of that, pollution that we were talking about before. My only answer to that is that, what the Kepler guys are doing. Have you heard about the Kepler conference? Scientific astrology, groups of research doing empiric research within the field of astrology, letting the research teach us what is right and what is wrong, and becoming better, more professional astrologers because of it. And because the computers and statistics don't give a heck what kind of tradition you come from, they just give you the result. And I think that's part of becoming more professional as astrologers, and really letting the facts teach us what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, always has happened too, that there have always been old things come back in astrology, and then some new things come in. I remember, when I was learning astrology back in the day, there was some new ideas come in, and some didn't work, some did. and some ancient ideas, some traditions that came back again. Orrery astrology was very big, and traditional astrology for a while. So these sort of come and go. It's part of the nature, I think, of astrology. But of course, the internet has exploded it. I think that's the difference. I think it's just, you've got all of this wave of all sorts of stuff all at the same time. I think that's what's happened. Maybe. What do you think?
It's like, I feel things aren't, anybody can put up a website. Nobody's vetting it.
Oh.
And I have seen an occasion people contact me and tell me such wacky things. I'm like, where'd you get it from? And I go, oh, this website told me that these are my 3 dominant planets. And I don't even know what technique they're using. And the thing that first got me wary about shadow of retrograde was that, did somebody look for things to feel crappy about? It's bad enough Mercury's going retrograde.
We found loads of stuff already.
And Alfie Lavie, I'm not sure how to...
From a Capricorn.
Yeah, I know, right? Alfie Lavie is made this great chart about a decade ago. He made a yearly chart and he indicated all the times Mercury was retro and in the shadow period. And then he included all the void of course moons. And he basically said there's 5 days a year you can do anything.
Yeah.
You know, and I can't help but wondering if like guilt from Christianity is creeping into astrology. You have to feel bad. You have to feel bad about something all the time. So, but that's me. So I agree. I think we are trying to do tests and stuff. What I'm talking about other people, there's a book in Eris that's like 800 pages. I think Eris has moved 5 degrees in the past century. How did you possibly put together an 800-page book on something that hasn't moved? I'm not saying it's invalid. I'm not saying this, I don't want to make it sound like I'm just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but I'm just wondering what kind of verification.
I just think that's always happened, to tell you the truth.
Right.
I just think it's on a much bigger scale now because of the internet.
Yeah.
So, it's just exploded. But it was happening. I saw it happen, back in the day. It's like, and always there were astrologers you had to weed out and think. And
yes.
Always had to try and make yourself retrable and try and get you more certificates and more diplomas to prove that you weren't just a nutter,
And then have them turn to you. Then have them turn to you and say, "Those aren't legit anyway." It's like, "Thank you, Mr. Scientist."
So is it people trying to find a niche for themselves so that they can say, "Look at me, look at me"? It could be. I just wanted to say that a while back I watched a video, a recording that I can't think of his name now, Astrology University guy. He filmed Robert Hand and Stephen Forrest at a convention having a private conversation about what's going on with younger astrologers in it. And it was really funny because, it was a good conversation, but both of them by the end of it agreed that with a lot of the astrologers coming up, the younger ones, they had no idea what those people were talking about. They're like, I hear them, but I don't know what they're talking about. There's just so much stuff that, where are they getting this? And it really fits with what you were saying, Anthony. Where is this coming from?
I'm not against new techniques, and stuff. I'm not, but, and actually, what is it? I think Chris Brennan has been very involved, and they discovered a lot of Greek manuscripts that nobody had translated because it was about astrology. So why bother translating them? And now they are. So we're getting a lot of information about Greek astrology that we didn't have available before. So I'm not against necessarily investigating stuff, but it amazes me how quickly everything seems to be getting accepted. Well, at least not by me, but by everybody else.
I think it's important that astrology is an evolution. And talking as an evolutionary astrologer, Jeffrey Wolf Green made evolutionary astrology in the 1980s. So it's not super old. So it was new then too. But what I see, I can just speak for myself that there's a lot of very superficial pop astrology.
Right.
All of these astro memes, and
yes.
I don't like it. It's completely my personal opinion, but there is a superficiality, and then clients come and say to me, "Oh, yeah, but when I have this and this placement, then that means that this and this is happening." I'm saying, no, because you have to look at your whole chart.
Right.
There's a certain degree of, I call it pop astrology, or a certain way of sun sign astrology that is really just
Yes.
superficial, and I think that brings the whole astrological scene into an area which feels very ridiculous, and I think it takes away the depth that astrology can have and has, from my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. But I have to say that has always happened with astrology. I think it's always happened. In some ways, pop astrology has kept astrology alive when it might have died years ago. In fact, people used to be burned at the stake, didn't they? For heresy. So we have come a long way. At least
I still worry about that, by the way.
Do you?
Yeah,
Me too.
I really
Me
do.
too. That would happen to me if I walk into Uganda.
There you
I
go.
would either be stoned or burned at the stake, depending what's around, wood or stones, you know.
And
But
Instagram
am I
profile.
happy about the pop astrology and the general level of astrology on the web? No, I'm not. Am I happy about the fact that there is a blooming in astrology and it is getting out there? And I see the evolution in the information provided. Right now, when I open Google to see when was Pluto in Leo, and Pluto was in Leo from these and these years, causing transformations in leadership, sports, and the entertainment industries.
Wow.
This generation tends to have intense will, confidence, power, pride, creativity, and dramatic ability. This is Google.
Yes.
Okay.
Ain't you Dr. Google?
So am I happy there is an evolution and the consciousness is growing? Yes. Is it up to par? No. Is mine up to par? No. So we're all
But there is
getting
still
there.
that push. There's always seems to be a core of astrologers worldwide that are pushing to keep the more pure astrology alive and evolve it, like you just said. Yeah.
Well, the positive side of it is that it does draw more interest. It draws people who wouldn't necessarily have ever had an interest or even an awareness of astrology, and it kind of just grabs their interest and makes them at least aware.
Yes,
Even though it's on a superficial level and maybe polluted with some not so true facts, or not facts, but information, I should say. But it does at least open up the awareness to a wider population.
Yeah, and to Lynn's point, all of these astrologers out there are looking for their own little niche. They want to have something that draws people to them to to sell their wares, and they find all of these ways of doing it, and some of them are may not be as deep, to Verena's point, but then again, to Michaela's point, it's kept us going. It's what it's so it's the old buyer beware. You have to know a little bit about what you're buying, before you do it.
And what's impressive is there are some really good astrologers and very young astrologers, like you guys, young astrologers come up who are just stunningly good. So, that's the hope of astrology. There'll always be those great astrologers out there, as well as a lot of pop ones. But hey,
And I mean, the positive thing is too that the diversity of astrologers, so everyone can find what they need in a way, Hellenistic or evolutionary or archetypal. I mean, that's brilliant. Yeah.
And now being able to get on the internet and actually pick and choose what you want. I mean, it's brilliant. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah, something for everyone.
Yeah.
And I get something out of it too, because I can go around correcting people. And that's the frustration, I think, is actually somebody, I'm not going to name names, but a prominent astrologer actually posted yesterday that Lionsgate is, and he spelled out the word BS. That boy, he got Facebook comments. I'm not arguing right or wrong. I'm just telling you what happens. As we all know, you ask any astrologer, you ask 10 astrologers a question, you'll get 25 answers.
I mean, the Lion's Gate comes out of a very, I don't know how it's grown into what it's grown. And there are a lot of pop astrologers who are obviously, using it commercially. That's obvious because they keep repeating the same things about it. And it doesn't, you know what I mean? It sounds very prepackaged, but I do believe come out of, obviously it's about the age of Aquarius and turning into the age of Aquarius, as we are doing for a very long time. But people, and that's another thing, people are pushing the age of Aquarius, but you can't push it. It's going to happen when it's going to happen. And I don't believe it has happened yet, but anyway.
Well,
It's like Hallmark holidays, there's one every day so they can sell a card.
Yes, exactly. So it's like Aquarius is getting pushed all the time, the age, and the Lion's Gate is as the age of Leo, which is obviously Leo. The age of Leo was 12,000 years ago, before Aquarius. So it's on the descendant now. So Leo is on the descendant, and it's sort of, in some ways it's good because it's bringing that back into focus, that we are actually a stage halfway. And, our opposite is Leo, and the Lion's Gate is bringing back that energy from the past. And it is about Sirius, should be. I mean, Sirius, the whole period starts in July with Sirius, it's like rising. Yeah, and then it goes into August. So it's the heat rising in ancient Egypt and the inundation, of the Nile. And their big New Year's festival was at this time, July, August. And so, and Isis, of course, is the goddess of Sirius. So, and it's the dog, Canis Major. And so that's where you get dog days. That was something I wanted to mention. Dog days, because the dog star, which is Sirius, is part of the Canis Major constellation. And so it's the dog days, is the very hot days. So I was reading something actually about it can get overheated, and that's the ancient Egyptian law about it, saying, okay, July and August, great, but there is an overheating that can happen, and it's the negative side of Sirius. It's the negative side of the great mother, who is Isis, who is also the terrible mother, and she can turn into Sekhmet, who starts devouring everything. Yeah, exactly. And she needs, and the old legend was she was placated by beer that was stained with beetle blood to make it red. So she thought she drank the beer and got drunk. It's very charming legend. But then that was at that festival of Sirius rising and of August. And it's sort of come back from that. We're going into Aquarius eventually. So it's bringing back Leo into it, and Sekhmet, and the goddess, and Isis, and who is the goddess of Aquarius, in fact, and Sirius. So it's tapping into that. So if it's used purely, it is good to sort of understand that. I mean, lately we've had all this heat come up about, the part of the world is in heat rising and too much heat. And that's sort of very synchronistic with this, I think. It's very sort of telling us synchronistically that there is too much heat. And so we have to be aware of that, and we have to tone it down somehow. We have to cool off the earth, cool off our consciousness, and meditate and ground ourselves. And the Lion's Gate is a meditation time when you respect the goddess and, ask the goddess to stop rampaging and turn into the good Sekhmet, who is, Isis again, and Hathor, the cow-headed goddess, and all of that. What do you think, guys?
Well,
What do you say to that?
And Ishtar as well.
Well, go ahead, Nia, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Before the Greeks, Venus, talking about Venus in retro right now, but Venus always had two sides. As Inanna, as Ishtar, as Isis, turning into Sekhmet. She always had a destructive side, that with a lot of wrath towards things that were not true or not, moral, in a sense.
Yes.
She's the destroyer and the creator. And that was taken away by the hegemony of men, by the rising of patriarchy.
Yeah. And that side should be understood. Again, it's like the shadow, understood, because you can't just think, oh, I'm going to meditate and everything's going to be lovely. It's funny, I had a personal, very quick analogy with it. My dog attacked, I'd been doing all my meditation as usual of my ISIS, and I was writing about ISIS and all of it. And one of my dogs attacked another ferociously, and it wasn't overheated here. It's not over hot. There was no excuse for it. And it was vicious. It was terrible. I explained it to Sue and Robin and everything. And it really traumatized me. And it's like, my God, I was suddenly shocked, and it took me back. And in some ways, it's sort of reminded me that this is something that has to be observed and respected of this, and maybe I wasn't actually doing my meditations to the depth I should have been doing. And I wasn't doing them. I really wasn't seeing what I should have been seeing and taking this seriously. I had to do that seriously enough. And so it sort of shocked me at first a lot, but then after I got over the trauma, it was like, okay, where is the message here? What is the meaning? And I felt it was like, go in more into this. What is that legend saying? What is that myth saying? And it's saying, respect the goddess, respect the cycles, change, nature. We have no respect for nature. We think we're responsible for everything and can do everything, and our technology can do everything. And maybe we should stand back from that. And meditation is great, and we do need to do that, but we need to really do it very seriously and learn and know that we can elevate, and we can. And I guess it had helped that I had done meditation, because then I seemed to get answers in then. And it did stop me dead, though, for a while. I couldn't function. And I thought, my God, I thought I was on a good track here. I was all elevating. And I wasn't. And the shadow came in, and I thought, what anger have I not? This dog was totally incensed. Where is that in myself? So anyway, I think the Lion's Gate really is about that. And it's been popularized, again, as Anthony was saying, it's been polluted. But I do think there's something to be said about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's to me just sometimes it's the way things get incorporated so quickly, which kind of leads to sort of the next question, although maybe we also might want to talk about climate change. But I just want to say, how long does it take before you accept new techniques? I've looked at astrocartography. I play with it. I don't really use it. I tend to be a what I call meat and potatoes astrologer. I give me your birth chart, you give me your progressions and your transits, and if I have to, I'll go do the rest of the stuff with the solar arcs and whatever. So I'm a big less is more person, which is why I'd like to take all those asteroids and throw them out the window. But that's me. Because now we get into the trouble of like, why are we picking the asteroids we're picking? There's thousands of them, So again, I just pull back. I tend to wait for like
good ones. Didn't know this. Sue knows that.
I tend to pull back.
Tens of
but I
thousands.
pull back because I gotta wait another 100 years before I accept these things. Maybe in my next life.
Well,
but
when
Go
ahead. Sorry.
Lynn, go ahead. No, you finish up. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, well, when they become useful to you is when you're going to start using them. And I've been doing astrocartography, not a lot, but I've had a few times in which clients needed me to do it because they needed to figure out where to move. And I've gotten kind of into it just in general, like, for example, I moved away. I moved to Europe for 4 years. I moved back. I'm originally a Chicagoan. And, when I looked at the astrocartography for me and my chart, my Venus, my moon, and my IC run through Chicago, not directly, but within the parameters of it. And I'm like, oh, that's why I like it here. It's home, it's comfy. And it is interesting, I've helped some people figure out where they should move because of that. And they said, it worked out really well for them. So, but I only started using that technique when it came into my life through clients who said, can you help me figure out where of these places I should move? So I'm like, okay, yeah, because, it's very difficult to get the actual birth or incorporation time of different cities. They're not going to give you the minutes, they'll give you the date. So I started doing the astrocartography for that. So I'll take up new techniques as they become relevant to what I need to do. And that's otherwise I'm like, yeah, okay, it's nice to know about it, but it doesn't really come into what I need to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a similar experience as Lynn does, because right now in Israel, 1 of 3 people wants to immigrate because of everything that is happening here. So I'm asked a lot, where should I immigrate to?
Mm-hmm.
And in my personal experience, it always worked for me, you know, moving around the globe, even for vacations.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not. I just use astrocartography as an example, but because I've used it too, and I think this some. I always go back to the natal chart, but astrocartography certainly suggests that moving different places will accent different things. But again, it's a question of like mentioned, Isabel Hickey took like 35 years before she wrote anything about Pluto because she felt it was too soon. I don't think people wait 5 minutes for their posting stuff on their website. There's a comet out there. Oh my God, it's in Taurus. The world's coming to an end. We're so quick without somewhere between enthusiasm and actual scientific research are called for here is what I'm kind of saying. In terms of I use astrocartography because to say when you're moving or if I'm going to go on vacation, I'll be, well, let's see what's going on. So I appreciate that. But no, I'm not a mundane astrologer. Okay, much. I'll listen to what people are saying. But I'm wondering, does anybody have any comment on the fires, the flooding, the climate change? Is it something you're seeing on the outer planets? Where do you see it in the skies, in the chart?
Well, Uranus in Taurus is supposed to be indicative of earthquakes and fires and such like that. So, sort of spontaneous combustion type of thing, but certainly, eruptions of a sort. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when Mars comes in to aspect it, or I noticed a lot when Mars aspects Pluto, that we have extreme weather.
Yeah.
Or the full moon.
Earthquakes too.
Or
earthquakes. Yeah. And Neptune is also implicated in earthquakes.
Definitely Uranus. A lot of, cyclones and stuff like that, tornadoes.
Well, and I know Taurus is like as stubborn as you get, and you have Uranus saying, let's change everything. So I know the two of them are fighting with each other all the time, So I can understand that part of it. And the Earth is unhappy at the moment, clearly,
Yeah.
And I'm always wondering if it's the Earth's trying to create antibodies to get rid of all humans. But that's me.
That's the metaphor. That's the subtext. Are we a disease or a blessing?
Yeah.
I'd go for disease, personally.
I thought you were Pollyanna.
I am, but I'm also a realist. And I think we're bad for the Earth.
You're destroying the image you created.
Oh, no.
I didn't know I had an image other than just awful. But, no, I mean, I see us as definitely a negative factor for the Earth itself. But it'll get rid of us at some point if we don't change. And it'll do just fine without us.
It's our challenge, though, isn't it? To raise our consciousness is our big challenge. And we have had a low point. I was looking at the big cycles, and I think we could go to the great year, in fact, the precessional year, which I have lately. Look at the cycles, and it's amazing, in fact, what the ancient Egyptians, the Hermetics, actually did. They put into the great year, which I absolutely believe they did devise the zodiacal systems in the in the great wheel.
The Sphinx is supposed to have been connected to the constellation of Leo.
Yes, absolutely.
It was during I think it was during the transition into the age of Leo.
Yeah.
And I think that the Earth has gotten rid of us more than once, and
Yeah, well, that's the problem. It seems to shake every now and again, like a dog. Back to the dog, good shake, and off we go. But
it's the race changes that come along, and there's like 20% of the population at this point that has an extra gland. That they are thinking that I'm an ARE, Edgar Casey person too, and this came through with that there's actually 20% of humans at this point in time have a gland that has previously not been there, and is their thinking is for extracting pollutants out of what you take in from the environment and being able to process them in safety for the body, and then be able to eliminate them. I don't know.
This is a newly developing gland that some people are being born with.
Yes.
Really?
And where is it?
I don't know the veracity of this. I mean, it may or may not be absolutely true, but this concept has been around for at least 20 years that I can think of. And I keep trying to find articles or books or something on the fifth race and the changes in the physicality of humans. And I really can't find anything. So I don't know, but something to put out there. If you hear of anything,
Well,
let me know.
I say if you can't order the gland on Amazon, it's not real.
Black market. That's it.
Yeah.
You need a donor.
Yeah. Aliens come down and donate their glands to us.
There you go. Or inseminate with that gland or the genetics for it.
Yeah.
That could be. Wow. I just scared myself.
Really good at evolving, aren't we? So that's the thing. We do evolve, and we are evolving consciously. I mean, that's what, roots about it.
No, I'm sure a lot of
shows you how you evolve.
The body has to accommodate that evolution.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
sure we have organs now that, like, when I was a kid, they just say, let's just go take your tonsils out. We know nobody needs them. Now, at least we leave them alone. But when I was a kid, you'd line up and they just, all the 12-year-olds get all their tonsils cut out. So and the appendix is considered a vestigial organ too. So yeah, I'm all for evolving. That's not a problem. And I mean, I would
challenges now, but we've got bigger challenges probably than we've ever had.
Well, the challenge has always been there. We just ignored them longer this time around. That's all.
Well, with technology,
wide now. Where in ancient times, any challenges you had were much more local. Whatever you did not affect somebody on the other side of the world.
Exactly. Now it's
but you definitely couldn't pee in the stream upstream from them. That's the there is and it's disturbing to me when I'm hearing people going like, well, we can't do that. It's not cost effective to lower global warming. It's like, okay, die with your money stuffed down your throat. Yeah. Great, they've already spent decades tricking us by telling us, it's all about carbon emissions. You're the problem. You should be recycling. I recycle all the time, but 80% of plastic waste comes from corporations, not from the consumer, and they're not recycling. Again, it's the wealthy.
And then they're getting us to buy their products. They're greenwashing us so that we buy their products and buy all these electric cars. And by the time they know, they've just sold us a lot of crap. So it feels like we're being taken again, frankly. And that's why I think it's the Aquarius thing where now people have to take responsibility and not put all the responsibility on Big Daddy, the government, to make all the decisions for them, trust them. And I think you said that, didn't you? Nia? You said, we have.
I'm listening to you and enjoying what I'm hearing. You're so right. You're so right. Yeah. Personal responsibility. Instead of blaming others for doing a bad job, we should have done ourselves a long time ago.
Let the patriarchy get away with it all. I mean, now we need to take responsibility.
Is getting away with it.
It still is, and So
and it's all coming to light with Pluto and Capricorn.
Yes.
Yeah, there is
back again.
Yeah.
The healthier side of Pluto at Capricorn is definitely a corrective energy. Because I know Capricorn's always associated with tradition, but more important, they're associated with results. And Capricorn will throw the tradition out if it's pointless.
And it's government.
Yeah, maybe government is pointless.
Yeah.
It could very well be. Bring up the anarchists again. But we're definitely in a shift. I'm going to stick around as long as I can, but see what happens. I think we're kind of ending. We have a few more minutes left. I was just wondering, how has your feeling about astrology changed or shifted from starting till now? Has there been? I mean, is it your attitude about astrology changed? Have you the way you changed readings? What's been your evolution since you started doing readings?
Who wants to go?
I mean, I can just say this much on a very simple level. I was so impressed with myself when I first started doing astrology readings. And then after a while, I realized I have nothing to do with this in the sense that it's got to be focused on the client. Whether reading astrology is really, it's nice to know I can do it. But I've just, after the first third or so, I really kind of turned things around and just made it all about them. And I've also discovered that sometimes, like, you go to a psychic fair and you have to do like 20 readings in 4 hours. And it doesn't even exhaust me anymore because I take the energy from the client, because they come to you so excited, like, tell me about myself. And I go, okay. And I once did 42 readings over a weekend at a retreat up in upstate. And I was so high when I left because I didn't take it out of me.
Oh.
So I just find focusing on the client is really a big shift for me in terms of astrology. I don't know if anybody else has
I've
managed.
become more conversational than, just spewing. Yeah, I think that would be my biggest shift.
I concur. Because when I started, it was me telling the person about themselves, and now I ask questions and then look at the astrology and then it starts a discussion, and most times it's bringing something out of the client that they want to talk about, or that is in the back of their mind that wants to come out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I agree as well. That's one thing that happened with me. And I often tell my students that they have to remember that in the same hospital at the same time, 50 other babies, 100 other babies, 200 other babies were born. None of them is Hitler or Madonna or JFK,
Yeah.
So when we talk about the chart, not the person. And we don't suggest to know the person better than they do themselves or other people in their lives. We let them tell us how that symbology played out in their lives. We can talk about the higher aspects of that symbology that we can aspire to, and the lower ones we need to be aware from. That's it.
I
the other
worked
thing
with,
that happened to me, I'm
Go ahead.
sorry, Lynn,
No, go
is
ahead.
that at the beginning, I felt like I have to acquire more techniques, a bit, like in pop astrology, because I wanted to know my way around with my Gemini moon. But then I became more like Anthony as a Taurus, going back to the pillars of astrology and really learning the basics as well as I could. And today, when a client comes in for the first time, transits is all I do. I look at eclipses and transits, and that's it. I don't even do progressions. And I find that a lot of astrologers skip the basics and don't know them well enough, not delve into the depth of these pillars. And that's a mistake in my eyes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to say two things relevant to what's been said. I worked with a man who was born 25 hours before me in the same hospital. And we had pretty much the same chart, same moon, because he was earlier than I was with we hated each other. And we looked alike too, which was really scary. We did not get along. We managed, but we really didn't like one another. And then just the other night, I was in a workshop where somebody was using Trump's chart, and not for the normal stuff. It was a whole different thing. But what he was pointing out, and he was saying exactly what's been said about, you have two people with the same chart, they're not going to manifest it the same way because they're different souls and they bring different things into it. But as he was going through, what Trump did, how the particular energy combinations, I realized this man could have been a very great spiritual leader if he hadn't chosen the dark side. So, we were talking in it about free will and what you can make of your chart, but that wasn't actually the focus of the of the workshop. But yeah, so you look at these charts, and you do need to have some kind of a conversation with the person you're reading for to get some kind of a fix on where are they in this soul evolution? What level are they at? How are they using this chart? Are they going with a negative aspect of it? Are they picking up all the positives? And if you don't have, if you've ever done a reading where you didn't meet the person or talk to them, they just sent you their birth information and they want you to write it out, it's like banging your head against a wall because you don't know who you're really talking with.
Right.
I think it's really hard to do that. And I try not to, but every once in a while that comes up, and I feel so inadequate doing that without having any sense of who they are. Because even if you don't talk to them, but you're in the same presence, in the same room, you get a feel for them.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree. There's that tendency to, when I do a reading and I don't actually talk to the person, I really just try to concentrate on the really stronger parts of the chart, positive or negative, and kind of outline like what you can do with it. It's like, oh, here's some silverware. You can cut this with a knife. You can use this for it. This is what's in your chart. And there have been charts where I've been so precise it's freaked me out because I turned to somebody at one point and said, I think you work for yourself in a health-oriented organization, assisting people in a humanitarian way. She'd started her entire company when Obamacare came out to help people move into the Obamacare system. Her entire company, that's all they did, was helping people move into the Obamacare system and making a profit for it. So she was doing this humanitarian business. I nailed it. And there's a part of me that says, wow, I'm wonderful. But there's another part of me is that some people are that specific and some are not. Some people have had 15 lives by the time they get to be 20, and some people have been, I draw and I'm going to draw with a pencil in my hand, kind of a thing. So I agree. It is tough to be and that's, by the way, what all the skeptics want, by the way. Send me 3 readings and not talk to anybody. It's like, I'm not playing that game.
Well, you just can't get as deep. I mean, without knowing anything about the person or feeling their energy at all, you just can't get as deep into the chart. But I mean, there's still a lot that you can tell somebody.
But it's not
absolutely
about making that connection is what it's about, and intuiting it, and then when you start to get from the person what they're about, and you see it reflected in the chart. I mean, that's what's exciting about it. So.
By the way, Lynn, I met my time twin 30 years ago. She was born in the same city in a different borough, within 30 minutes less of me. And it was kind of funny. We both were in publishing. She was a copywriter and I was the art director, but I wrote writing on the side and she was drawing on the side. We both had alcoholic parents. Why? How do I know that? We both met when we both suddenly decided to start going to ACOA meetings at the same time. Okay. So, and then she was very close to one of her sisters. I was very close to one of my brothers. And this is going to sound so weird, but I'm Taurus rising, Taurus moon. People keep telling me my hugs are wonderful. It's like, okay, I'm glad to know that. Nice to know. Well, I hugged this woman when we were first met, we were getting to know each other. And I thought, she's got a great hug. And then I realized that's my hug, So I kind of met my time twin and proved it to me, at least in that sense. And of course, after a few months, we stopped. It's like talking to myself. I don't need to talk to myself. So I didn't hate her, but, it was definitely, and of course, the differences of being male and female in society had to be counted into that. But I will say there was a study done once of twins separated at birth, and that's what becomes fascinating in astrology. I'm making this up in the sense I know the story, but I don't know the details. But these 2 guys were separated at birth. They both married at the same age. Their first wives were both named Deborah. They divorced around the same time. Their second wives were both named Lori. They both had three kids with similar names. They both had the only house in their neighborhood on the corner with a picket fence, but nobody else had picket fences. And the final killer to me was they showed their these gentlemen's basement workshops. One guy worked in electronics, one worked in wood. But the photograph, the tools were all hung up the same place. The wood, everything, like it looked like the same workshop with different implements. So that I found that a fascinating. I think we should do more research on twins separated birth for astrology, because twins growing up together, they're going to deliberately make themselves a little more different.
Right.
And sometimes they don't even though. I mean, two twins that I knew. I was, an adult, and they were teenagers going off to college. And one of them was going to major in accounting, and I forget what the other one was going to major in. And I thought, nah, he's going to end up in accounting anyway. And sure enough, he did. They both became CPAs, So they were born very close to each other. I mean, within like 2 minutes. So it does work.
Yeah, it does. It's just
well, and then you have to throw in like an EA, they have the evolutionary state, so everybody has a different evolutionary state that they're coming from, and they manifest their chart in different ways.
Exactly. That's the reason that as an evolutionary astrologer, wanting to give the person that comes in the most I can, even if they want me to write them and not speak with them or see them, even on Zoom, and feel from where inside within them they're coming out towards life in general. I will not be able to do my job as well as I want to. So I just decline when people ask me to write them something without, or record them something without meeting them, because I want to hear them, not their words, but their heart behind what's moving them. What do they aspire for, in their lives?
Well, and it's a two-way conversation. It can't, to me, I mean, if you want somebody to tell you something, you get a canned report from a computer, it'll be full of different
generalizations
that may be opposing.
There's no synthesis of the whole chart.
Exactly. And I don't think there can be without having the person giving input. I mean, I just don't see how that's possible.
You really have to use your intuition to a certain degree. So I can look at any chart, but it's like, what pops out of me? What stands out? How does it flow together? Is where, you don't want to go to a website. You want to get somebody to synthesize it into a human being, so to speak. Absolutely. And it's tricky.
Exactly. Well, hopefully astrology will go that way. It'll get more personal and realize you can't just throw out pop astrology, and it's not satisfying, and it's demeaning to astrology. It doesn't, in the end, it keeps it going, but on the other hand, you're never going to get the best out of it. And it's an incredible, there's so much to get out of it that's not known if you just stick to the pop stuff and never connect with people. So.
Well, and I think it also depends on, people want to go to different levels too.
Sure.
Some people just want the superficial, Gemini, stuff.
Yeah, I come
then
across
other people
like
want the
that.
Scorpio,
Right.
deeper and then, halfway in between.
Exactly. But we could do with a bit more of the deep, I think, rather than so much pop.
Well, I think so. But
we need it. We definitely need that in society. It would give us the depth that we're lacking. We're floundering around as society and not connecting and feeling disconnected, and it's getting worse. But astrology is something that could do that. So hopefully that will build that side of astrology. Yeah,
I think part of it,
promoting it. So
part of it to me too is just getting used to, the last 25 years have seen a major change. The internet became popular. Facebook got invented. Cell phones came out. We're still really new in this. And I tell you right now, living in the city, people become incredibly rude more than before. And look, New York City is not a rude place. We're brusque, but we're not rude. We will help you. No, it's true. Like we'll yell at somebody in the street.
I've had that happen to me in Manhattan. Yeah, where people were just wonderful to help, unasked, and saw I had a difficulty, and many people said, "Oh, let me help you." It was great.
But if you're not one of those people, our attitude is get out of my way. Okay. So but the thing is, I know the difference between rudeness and genuineness, and I do find people, like, it used to be graffiti didn't write over other people's stuff, and now they're back to covering up murals in the neighborhood. I find people can't even walk down the right and left side of the street. There's no more even idea of how traffic's supposed to flow anymore. And they stop and 8 people have a conference in the middle of the sidewalk. and everybody's trying to go around them because they're just oblivious to other people. So there is something about empathy that needs to be developed because people are all acting like, I got on the internet and I put my opinion up there, so I must be important. And I'm not saying everybody isn't important. They are, but in any given situation, you have to be aware that other people are important too. And you may want to get out of their way or not run them down because they're crossing the street or whatever it is.
That has to be redeveloped. And,
yes.
And unfortunately, it's going to be a strain to do that because territory, Uranus is going to get to be a factor. With mortgages going through the roof and people losing their homes and migration and all these problems, it's going to be a challenge. That's why it's so important to develop that and
redevelop it because it. Because we did have, one of the things about the 60s with Virgo and Uranus and Pluto working it out together, all the rules went out the window. But I think one of the reasons the hippies failed is they didn't create any new structures to adhere to. Okay. Yeah. So they just sort of wandered over to like Reagan and said, we want to be corporate masters now. Yeah. But there was never any really qualification in codifying.
Oh, some great astrologers came out of that.
Yes. And it changed a lot of thinking. If you look at a woman in 1959 was a hell of a lot different than 1970. And the options are still incredibly limited. But, I have my wife's relatives, she's got a dozen aunts and uncles. Half of them got married because they had to back in the 50s, and I'm not judging them, but I'm just saying that's the way the society was set up.
And it's great that society has moved on from that. We don't want to lose it, but if we're not careful here, we need to realize it's not a given thing. It's something we have to preserve.
Yeah,
and I think that's
in the United States, people are beginning to understand that with the revocation of Roe v. Wade. That they took it for granted. And having grown up in the 60s and having, had to fight for a lot of stuff. I'm like, no, you've got to be vigilant because even though it's supposed to be codified law, it can go away. Things can change. It happens everywhere. Like Iran used to be open, but if you've grown up with all these freedoms and rights, you don't think about they might not be here.
No, and we should now because we should look around and see just a minute. The world is changing and it's changing very fast. Yeah, and there are threats, and we have to be realistic. But we have to be optimistic as well, and we have to develop the spiritual faith as well, but not be unrealistic. It's a tough order, but hey, somebody's got to do it.
It's like a tightrope balancing,
But it's the order of the day,
Now.
Yeah.
This is the age of Aquarius. On the one hand, we're connecting through technology, but we're not sitting in the same room. We can't smell each other. We didn't hug. We didn't kiss. We're not eating something together. We're still far apart. So community and the value of community rises. We've been talking about that all along. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So we're still dealing with air energy instead of water. The modern technology and stuff. You get the Aquarian stuff, the air energy. Yeah, empathy is going to be running behind and catching up. I hope at some point.
Oh yeah, definitely. It has to. So, and we have to push for that. But just before we wind up, what is that on your shirt, Anthony? It's been bugging me the whole time. It's not the swords of tarot swords, is it?
No, it's the symbol from the movie Seven Samurai. You got it. One of my favorite movies. Somebody did a special edition. I bought it right away online.
It's great.
Kurosawa was a brilliant director anyway, but that's one of my favorites. It's rare you see a 3-hour movie where you're not bored throughout the whole thing. So anyway,
made so early,
same age as me. I think it came out in 1954, so maybe
exactly in the 50s.
And me too. But I'm not a magnificent movie. Anyway, thanks everybody. If there's
yes, you are, Anthony. Yes, you are.
Okay. So if any last minute words anybody want to say, the New Yorker's coming out. Who wants to say something? Because
I think Bradley does.
Bradley.
Yes.
Bradley has not. It hasn't been able to jump in between us.
I'll add one thought to this last thread. You know, it kind of ties into a lot of things we talked about today, but you know, like the pop astrology, a lot of like little snippets that people can go off of, but they're not synthesizing, understanding in full depth. You know, but then at the same time, what we're going to see in the future, I think, is that, you know, AI astrology is going to evolve more and more in-depth reading. And so coming back to like, what do we actually have to offer people, or why even go to a human for a reading in the future? And you know, it's definitely, it's just that human connection, which obviously we're talking about with the internet and the distance, actually being one-on-one, maybe even in person. Having another human being in front of you that knows that they love and that they care about what's going on in your life. I think that's what we're always going to have to offer. And if we can do that and read a chart, you know, we've got something to give people.
Absolutely. Here. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, seems like it might be a good time to wrap up. We're just about to 2 hours now, so
that was great.
Yeah,
really
I think it rolled pretty well. And what are we talking about? 3 months from now, Sue, roughly, or 2-3 months from now?
Yeah, a couple months.
Okay.
Sounds good to me. So that would put us in October. Sound good?
Great.
Well, should be fine.
Middle of October sometime.
Before that eclipse hits?
Yeah, right around the eclipse. Yeah, we didn't talk about it. So we can.
No, so that'll be,
I'll save the charts.
Yeah, next topic for discussion.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I'm gonna bail. We'll see you all next time. Take care.
Thank you so
much.
It's a pleasure meeting you all. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.